Who is the best example of you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain? Fritz Haber, he discovered a way to synthesize ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen gas, what is crucial for fertilizers. He was also later employed by Germany during World War I to find a way to weaponize chlorine, thus becoming the father of chemical warfare after successfully doing so. Basically, he saved billions and killed millions. Marshal Philippe Pétain from France. World War I hero after Battle of Verdun and World War II head of the collaborationist regime of Vichy that helped the Nazis. Yeah, with Foch and Clemenceau he was revered in France, not only as the winner of Verdun, but also was the army reformer. He spearheaded military reforms which not only drastically improved soldier living conditions, he also pushed for a different military doctrine, especially in how to defend in case of attacks. Every general in the Entente who followed his recommendations saw incredible success during the 1918 German offensive, while every who didn't follow his recommendations saw their forces pushed back. And then in World War II he became the textbook traitor and one, if not, the most reviled man in French history. Not only surrendering but also helping Nazi Germany in many ways that the Nazi didn't even ask for, most notably sending more Jews to be killed than the German requested. But also helping Nazi Germany in many ways that the Nazi didn't even ask for, most notably sending more Jews to be killed than the German requested. Although no small part of that reputation is using him as a lone scapegoat for policies a lot of them supported until the Americans showed up. As my grandfather used to say, when World War II was over, suddenly there were no longer any Nazis in Germany. Similar to France and everywhere else. I think there's a famous Churchill quote regarding Italians and how there were supposedly 100 meters of us back then, 50 meters fascists before the war ended, 50 meters freedom lovers afterwards. Of course it's an exaggeration, but it did point out the hypocrisy and not taking responsibility for what happened in our country. Jim Jones. It is said that if he would have died in the 60s he would have been memorialized as a civil rights hero. He was the first to integrate churches in Indiana, he pressured local restaurants to allow African Americans to be able to eat there, he paid the bills of the poor, many lived in his house, he adopted needy kids of various ethnicities. He opened soup kitchens in rough neighborhoods, no-cost nursing homes, and lived a modest life with little to his name to make it all happen. He also toured the evangelist circuits to making large sums of money, just about all of which went to support his poor congregation. Of which there were thousands of members. After many years of this service, something happened, drugs, narcissism, paranoia, and wild ideologies, that pushed him into a complete monster. He convinced about these poor people to follow him into a jungle to live out their communist fantasies only to be murdered by Jim. 918 men, women, and children including Jim and his wife died by poisoning on a single day. Edit, Jim died by gunshot wounds. I only know his name for Jonestown. I had no idea about his life beforehand. I just thought he was a crazy cult leader. Thanks for sharing that. If you're a reader you have to read the book The Road to Jonestown. It's an incredibly detailed and enthralling read about the entire life of Jim Jones from birth to his descent into madness. It's very powerful and shocking the truly evil things he did even before Jonestown. My dad. He was always against the Hoa in our neighborhood. Long story short, he wrote an apparently strong-worded letter about all the changes he would make, rules he would enforce, etc. There happened to be a vacancy up for grabs and he ended up as the president. Now he walks around the neighborhood bitching about everyone else's yards. In a thread liberally seasoned with serial rapists, masterminds of genocide and political psychos, this seems especially cruel. The absolute pettiness of Hoa disputes really puts this one in a different light. Oscar Pistorius. From global inspiration after winning multiple gold medals running as a double amputee, to convicted wife murderer. Fun fact, he only started winning after getting his prosthetics adjusted to be longer. And then complained about this when he lost to someone else with longer fake legs. I'm sad no one escalated the competition by using increasingly longer prosthetics. This happened with Olympic cross-country ski pole lengths though. I can't find the source, but I recall that one year the winner had longer poles. The next year, everyone had longer poles. This trend kept happening until one year someone showed up with super short poles and won. The next year, everyone had short poles again. Honestly, both of these, prosthetics and ski poles, feel like something with an upper bound on efficacy, like, you can't infinitely make yourself better by making them longer and longer. There's a point where you'll get diminishing returns and then start having a detriment. So I don't see any reason not to allow each competitor to dial in their own optimal length. Doing so effectively takes equipment length out of the equation. If everybody's using what's best for them, nobody has an equipment advantage, so it goes back to being human body versus human body. Benedict Arnold. He was possibly the Continental Army's best battlefield general, and he led the Americans to victory at the pivotal Battle of Saratoga, where he was wounded. Had he succumbed to his wounds, the Northeast us likely would be covered with statues of the man. As it was, he stewed over the lack of recognition of his greatness and eventually sold out his country to the enemy. Now, his name is synonymous with treason. Hilariously enough, the man who took all the glory and recognition that Arnold deserved, and who intentionally slandered Arnold to avoid losing his position, was General Gates. Gates is most remembered for the time he tried to organize a conspiracy to remove Washington and replace him as head of the Continental Army. Benedict Arnold became a traitor due to resentment spawned from being sidelined and slandered by another traitor. Allen and Gates were so insufferable they turned Arnold into a villain. I can't fault Allen too much though. Unlike Gates, his insufferable acts were more in line with not wanting to relinquish what he had earned for himself. Gates tried to steal what was Arnold's. Arnold was sent to take Allen's command, but Allen's men wouldn't follow him, so they agreed to work together and share the glory. It definitely wounded the pride of Arnold, but in a just world without Gates, Allen and Arnold would have been jointly hailed as heroes. Instead, Allen was captured, Arnold was disgraced and threatened to commit treason in protest of Congress' stupid decision, and Gates damn near sabotaged the entire revolution by refusing to send troops to Washington's aid. His ego also almost killed Hamilton, funnily enough. When Gates refused to relinquish troops, Washington sent Hamilton to meet with Gates on his behalf. Hamilton rode so hard that he came down with a vile illness and nearly died. I'm a massive military history nerd, been studying warfare history books and documentaries basically my whole life. So I knew the general story between Arnold, Gates and Allen, but not all the details you described, and was nodding along in agreement. I'm surprised none of you mentioned what eventually happened to Horatio Gates, the dude who snaked Benedict Arnold, causing him to go over to the British. A few years after Saratoga, he ducked up so royally at the Battle of Camden that his reputation as a general was ruined and he was relieved of command for the remainder of the American Revolution. His defeat to the British at Camden that bad, Gates took command of the Southern Department in 1780, but was removed from command later that year after the disastrous Battle of Camden. Gates's military reputation was destroyed by the battle and he did not hold another command for the remainder of the war. Following the battle, he was regarded with disdain by his colleagues and he never held a field command again. His political connections, however, helped him avoid any military inquiries or courts-martial into the debacle. I believe there was even a line in The Patriot where Mel Gibson says, "That Gates is a damn fool. Spent too many years in the British Army. Going muzzle to muzzle with the Redcoats in open field, it's madness." Edit, found the scene where Mel Gibson calls Gates a fool. Washington had his flaws as a commander. I don't think he deserves quite as sterling a reputation as he has, but if Gates had succeeded in replacing him, we'd still be British citizens. Gates was a traitor and a fool, and the fact that he wasn't hung for his crimes is eternally disappointing to me. The thing that made Washington great, emo obviously, was his skill at a tactical retreat. Doesn't really fit the macho American propaganda now, but a huge part of why the Army survived the early years. Indeed, arguably Washington's greatest accomplishment at that time was keeping the Continental Army intact. Everything else followed from there. Blizzard Entertainment. Which is hilarious in hindsight considering that this is one of their favorite tropes a la Arthas or Reaper. Playing Arthas' story through the Dub C3 campaign was so fun as a kid. The African National Congress. The party mainly responsible for the liberation of the South African people from the apartheid regime. Now just a group of totally corrupt cronies. A country with so much promise, completely run into the ground. A whole load of these examples prove that it's not you become the villain, it's that eventually your secret villainy gets found out. Some really are people that did amazingly good then later amazingly bad things. Fritz Haber best example emo. Some, most, are people that did amazingly bad things while they were well loved and people only found the truth later. Bill Cosby, Jared from Subway. Kevin Spacey would have gone down as an acting legend. What makes him so much worse is that Hess abrasively unapologetic about it. And his only response has basically been weaponized narcissism. Get accused of raping a drugged 14-year-old? Ladies and gentlemen, I am a gay man. Like, That was his official response to something that bad. Hey guys, I know y'all called this 2 decades ago, but I like dudes. When it kept getting worse and more accusations about his assaults and general toxicity came out, Mother Ducker releases a video as President Frank Underwood, though Hess already been written off of House of Cards, glaring at the camera and giving these sinister threats to those that want to come after him. He even announced plans to work on a film after his fall where he'd be playing a cop chasing a sexual predator. Which is almost entirely so that Googling Kevin Spacey rapist would populate with stuff about the movie to muddy the actual news. Fucking vile. I hate it because he was genuinely one of my favorite actors after Usual Suspects, Say 7N, and American Beauty. But it turns out, his ability channeled that weird, slightly off-putting vibe and the weirdo characters he played was just him taking the mask off. You missed the best part: a bunch of his accusers died. Distractify.com. So what was the cause of death? Kindness. Looks like the murderer brutally assaulted them with it. Even stuffed every orifice of the victim with kindness.